Welcome to Face Review. Just kidding. I don't possess a lot of skills that I'm like 100% confident in, but guessing what historical era someone's face would look good in is one of them. I have mentioned that before, but if I had $1 for every time I had to stop myself from running after someone to tell them they look like they were born in 1585, let's just say it wouldn't be Jeff Bezos launching that rocket, that would be me. Because, you know, that would be so many dollars that I would be... Now, because reviewing pictures of strangers that I found on the internet would kind of be a delicate matter, a while ago I decided to ask you to submit your own photos for my entertainment. And I thought, you know, somebody will have to be willing to do this, right? And I was wrong, because everybody was willing to do this. And I ended up with 5,234 submissions. And naturally, because I felt bad, I looked through every single photo that was submitted and it took me 2 full days. So not gonna lie, around picture 500, I had a lot of things to think about. First of all, the amount of unique features, incredible faces, but most of all, the amount of beauty. And I'm not saying this to be nice, like genuinely all the 5,234 photos were so fucking beautiful that, I mean, have I googled some of the pictures because I was unsure if they're fake? Maybe. Have I shown some of them to my friends because people were so unbelievably gorgeous? Perhaps, you know? Around picture 1292, I had a small existential crisis when I realized that all those photos represent separate people, each one of which leads their own life and has their own troubles and hopes and joys.
The prophecy is true.
And eventually I was like, how the hell am I going to fit it in a video? So by the time I was like halfway through all the submissions, I already knew that I had way more historical faces than I needed. Like, I picked over 300 of the best, then I narrowed it down to 200, and then I just picked whatever I felt like editing. So because there are so many of the good ones still left out there, there is a possibility that there will be more than one video about this, but I'm not promising anything because so far whenever I titled a video part 1, there was literally never a part 2, so let's just not go there for now, okay? And also, if you submitted your photo but you don't feel comfortable about me using that photo anymore, just let me know and we'll cut it out. Without further ado, let's jump right into it! Jesus Christ, where do I get the energy from? Because like, this ain't it. First up, we have this lovely picture of Marielle. I'm gonna pronounce all these names impeccably, I have a feeling. With a beautiful bunny, and I mean, as soon as I saw it, I was like, this one's medieval. And I had this specific style of wimple in my head that I couldn't quite place because I'm uneducated and I couldn't remember which century it was from, but eventually I found out that I think it's 13th century. And now keep in mind that I cannot draw, right? And let alone using color, and let alone using Photoshop, and let alone using color using Photoshop, using my sister's drawing tablet, so this is not gonna be great. Just letting you know. Like, don't get your hopes up. All of these are kind of like mediocre middle school style. But I just wanted to see what people will look like in like the historical hairstyles and the outfits. So here's what I think Marielle would look like in a 13th century style wimple. Next up we have the Kaya, I hope. And the Kaya's photo gave off like Regency era vibes to me. Like, you know, a sassy main character in a Jane Austen novel. So I tried giving them those like iconic Regency curls, and I think it worked. Like, I don't think it's an easy style to rock. Then we have Ante Loresa, and I mean, y'all have no business being this gorgeous. Let me just say that. I think Ante Loresa's face could work in a variety of eras. I think 1790s might work here with all of the curls and, you know, voluminous hairstyles. But I decided to go for like 1890s ball gown style, mainly because of the off-shoulder blouse that already gave this vibe, but I think it is a look, like, not gonna lie. Kelly's photo screamed mid-Victorian to me, so I went for this sort of voluminous, like 1850s hairstyle, and my lack of drawing skill really shows in this one. Like, I feel like it would be so much better if someone skilled actually did it, but you probably get the idea. I felt like Tegan's face could work really well with 16th century Dutch portraiture, but after like 5 botched coif drawing attempts. I just took an actual 16th century portrait and I just posted Tegan's face inside it, and proportions or angles aside, I think it works. Like, I think this could be a thing. Sporty has very distinguished features, I think, so I decided to go for this like Cleo de Merode style of the mid to late 1890s, and I think Sporty really rocks the high collar. A minute of silence to all of the people that sent me their pets. I should probably do a separate historical pet review. Jenna's face reminds me of the faces I've seen in like numerous 16th century and 17th century paintings, so I decided to give a late 16th century curdle and coif a try and see if it works, and I think it worked nicely. I'm just a little sad that I had to cover Jenna's stunning hair. Eris, okay, how are y'all even real? Eris seems to be going for a little bit of a 60s inspired hairstyle here, but I thought the overall features and face shape remind me of, again, the Regency era, and I thought a bonnet might work nicely. And again, my Photoshop skills failed me a bit here, and I feel like it's not doing Eris justice. But just imagine Eris as a fierce Napoleonic era heroine about to inquire about a lover who's stuck in a prison. You know, you get me now. When I saw this picture of Jackie, it immediately reminded me of those early 1900s photos of Edwardian actresses like Evelyn Nesbit or or Lily Elsie. Why did I know that name? What happened to me? And I feel like Jackie's features, and especially hair, will result in a very successful acting career back in 1906. So consider that. Mr. Coffeehead delivered a photo with detailed captions regarding all the surroundings in case you were confused, and at first I thought this face might work in a late 18th century context, but then I was like, it's giving Leyendecker. So I attempted a Leyendecker style hairstyle and suit, and not gonna lie, the suit is not my best work. But I think we can all agree that Mr. Coffeehead here rocks this sleek hairstyle. The person who described themselves as likes listening to sad music and has 2 thumbs. At first I thought they would look great in 16th century style cap, but then I thought, you know what, there's other 16th century styles that I have to consider, and lo and behold, turns out Italian 16th century portraiture is their jam. As soon as I saw Berkeley, I knew we have something 18th century going on here. And I think maybe because of the makeup, which reminded me of the early to mid 18th century makeup style. But also in general, I think Berkeley could definitely pull off a robe a la Française, which is not something easy to pull off. So initially, when I saw this photo of Ava, I thought the whole look with the sweet smile and the pose reminds me a lot of like 1920s dancers. But when I was working on the pic, it started leaning sort of to 1930s, and I decided to just go with it, and eventually it looked so much like a vintage ad that I just swapped the phone for a Coca-Cola bottle. And honestly, if it was slightly better done and then uploaded on Pinterest, I'm sure it could pass for like an original ad. Next up we have G, and I feel like there's already a vintage vibe to this pic and to G's features, which I decided to further accentuate by turning them into like a 1920s style vamp. And not gonna lie, like some of you know what you're doing. Like you know what you look good in, and you know what style suits you. And G is an example of that, I think. Next up we have Rollo, who I thought had this like joyful 17th century style appearance. And again, I was trying to work on drawing a 1670s wig at first, but eventually gave up, and I just photoshopped Rollo into an actual portrait. Matthias, straight up, already looks like it's 1880s, so there wasn't a lot I had to do. But I photoshopped Matthias into an actual 1880s photograph, and I think I accidentally exposed a vampire, so let's move on because I don't want to die. Anastasia's smile together with the middle part made me think of 1830s. It's a hairstyle not many could pull off, but I feel like Anastasia can. And again, my Photoshop skills failed me, and Anastasia looks sort of like a 90s Disney character here, which is not a bad thing. Like, I would 100% watch that movie. Aziza looks so radiant in this photo that it immediately made me think of, again, Edwardian actresses. And it could be because of the side glance and like over the shoulder look, but I thought Aziza would look fantastic as a sort of like a Gibson girl postcard. I thought Amy Mary's face would look great in something like rigid and structured. I thought, well, rigid and structured screams 16th century to me. Dare I say I wasn't wrong? Lillian's pose and expression and the hair as well made me think of our growing Edwardian actresses club. And also it's a bit crazy because when I saw the photo I was like, oh, this kind of looks like Lillian Gish. And like turns out it is a Lillian. Like how weird is that? Then we have another Anastasia. And can we have some commotion for Anastasia's stunning face because it is just so unique and beautiful. I think it could work in a number of historical eras, to be honest. Like, I couldn't really decide between 18th century or like 1920s or mid-Victorian, but I eventually went for an 1850s style and I think it works really well. Like, I could easily imagine this being a daguerreotype. Daguerreotype. I have not used English for a while. Next up we have Jose, and when I saw Jose I immediately thought of 17th century. It sort of has that 17th century self-portrait vibe, so I found one, like I found a 17th century self-portrait and I photoshopped Jose into it. Inna's face is very versatile, like I think it could work for multiple eras, but there was something about the hair that made me think of like early 1900s and those like grand Edwardian portraits. Vanessa, first of all, the more time I spent looking at this photo, the more I realized how stunning it is, but second of all, I have no idea if some of you are like interested in different historical eras and you use them to your advantage, if you know certain historical styles look good on you, or if it just happens accidentally. But Vanessa has that like 1650s look nailed. Like I didn't even have to do much because it already looks like a 17th century portrait. Jessica possesses some of the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen, and I felt like Jessica's face could do really well in vintage styles like 1940s, 1930s. So I went for this 1930s look and I feel like Jessica absolutely rocks it, but I felt really bad for covering those beautiful eyebrows. Sam's photo immediately looked 18th century to me, so I wanted to try out like a powdered hair look. And not gonna lie, I think it kind of worked. Like I could easily imagine a portrait like that. So at first I thought Brett will look really nice in Victorian styles, you know? But then I was like, you know what? We didn't really get to see anyone sporting an over-the-top 1770s look, and I thought Brett might pull it off. Poor photoshopping skills aside, I think I was right. Okay, Evangeline. Now how do I say this? You are history. That's one of the most historically looking faces I have ever seen. You would be worshipped in medieval times. You would be painted in the Renaissance era. You would be considered a masterpiece in the 18th century. You would be adored in the Victorian era. I genuinely didn't even know what to do with it. Like I didn't know what to do here, so I just left this as it is. And guess what? It still looks like a painting. So that tells you something. Moving on to Abba. Abba's expression and the hairstyle made me think of like 1920s flappers, you know, those like really excited, joyful, energetic women. Not gonna lie, I had the hardest time trying to draw a damn cloche hat. Like who would have thought out of all these things cloche hat would be something that I would almost give up on. James, again, I think is one of the people that know what they're doing. Like, I'm sure that hairstyle and beard is not a coincidence, and either you are really fascinated by the 1870s or you are trying to adapt to modernity as an immortal being and you are failing miserably because we all know that you were born in 1853. I want to take a moment to appreciate all of the submissions from the veil-wearing people, and if you're wearing a hijab or some other head covering, don't be afraid to get into historical costuming. It is absolutely okay if you want to make a historical costume, but you would have to adjust it for your modesty or for your preferences. It is completely fine. Like, we need you in this hobby, so if anyone tells you otherwise, they're not worth hanging out with. Speaking of veils, here is lovely Nabia, and Nabia's smile immediately made me think of, again, Regency era. So I decided to try out a bonnet. I thought that a bonnet might work well here, and like Nabia just looks like the type of a character in a Jane Austen novel that gets into complicated funny situations all the time, but is able to sort of handle them with grace. Next up we have Condottiere. And I don't know if it's because of the facial hair or just the general vibe, but I got a very distinct 17th century vibe here. So I just decided to go with it. Something about Josephine's face made me think it will look great in an 1840s getup, and I mean, It truly does, and it's not often that you see someone rocking a cap that well. Sadly, this was the last face in this episode of When Are You From? And I would love to include all of the submissions here, but at the end of the day, one can only do so much. And not gonna lie, after 2 days of photoshopping straight, my back was starting to do some strange things. So thanks a lot for submitting your lovely photos. And I have to say, it's one thing to like read your comments and interact with you online, but it's completely different to actually see your faces and to realize that you all come from like all sorts of backgrounds and different corners of the world, and you are all different ages and different sizes and different ethnicities, and it's honestly made me so grateful that you all decide to, you know, spend some time with me here every now and then. So thank you for that. It's getting a bit awkward. Bye.